My dear friends, there was a time in this land when the American dream was wrapped in the gloss of perfection. The perfect job, the perfect house, the perfect smile, the perfect life. And oh, how we chased it and how it ran faster and farther with every step we took. But now, listen to me, now we are waking up. Waking up not to a lesser dream, but to a greater truth. We were not born to be perfect. We were born to be powerful. We were born to be purposeful. We were born for a reason that perfection could never explain. Purpose is greater than perfection. It is a truth that strikes deep into the heart of every soul that has ever felt the weight of not being enough. Perfection tells us we must earn our worth, that we must polish every corner of our lives, that any crack is weakness, any failure is final. But purpose, purpose whispers something different. It says you were made for more than this performance. You were made to live, to serve, to move with intention even when the path is messy, even when your hands tremble. Perfection is exhausting. It demands endless proof. It asks you to silence your humanity, to hide the struggle, to cover the scars. It will not let you speak until your voice is clean, until your story is airtight. And in doing so, it robs the world of your realness. It shuts the door on the very thing that could bring healing, your truth, your experience, your journey. Perfection is a mask, and behind it so many are suffocating. But purpose frees. Purpose lifts. It doesn't wait for you to have all the answers. It doesn't require a flawless summary or a polished exterior. It just asks for your yes, your surrender, your belief that even in your imperfection your life can matter, that your story can shape others, that your pain, your process, your progress, even when incomplete, can be powerful. There are people right now aching under the pressure of appearances. Good people, talented people. People with gifts the world is desperate to see, but they stay silent, they stay stuck. They wait until they feel perfect enough to begin. And so dreams die, voices dim, light goes unshared, all in the name of a lie. Because that's what it is, a lie. Perfection is a lie sold to us in magazines, on screens, in classrooms, and even from pulpits. It tells us there's only one way to be worthy. That success comes to those who never stumble, never falter, never fall. But when has that ever been true? When have the greatest breakthroughs come from those who had no bruises, no scars, no story? The truth is, the people we admire most are not perfect. They're purposeful. They kept going when it was hard. They led with heart. They didn't wait to be whole. They gave what they had. They showed up. They were honest. They were willing. And that willingness became the miracle. You don't need to wait another day to step into what you were made for. You don't need to perfect your craft, your image, your speech, or your timing. What you need is clarity. What you need is conviction. What you need is to remember why you started in the first place. That spark, that ache, that inner pull that says, this matters. That is purpose, and that is enough. Perfection will leave you chasing approval that never satisfies. Purpose will anchor you in meaning that cannot be shaken. When you live for perfection, your life becomes a performance. But when you live from purpose, your life becomes a legacy. People may forget your achievements, but they will never forget how your purpose made them feel. You were not born to impress but to impact. From the moment you took your first breath, your life was already significant. Not because of what you could prove, but because of what you were meant to bring into this world. There is a difference, a sacred difference, between impressing others and impacting lives. One is rooted in image, the other in substance. One demands you be seen, the other calls you to see. And in this generation, we must remember that the deepest, most lasting change never comes from performance. It comes from purpose-filled presence. To impress is to constantly measure. Measure your words, your clothes, your body, your bank account. It is to live under the spotlight of someone else's approval, always wondering if you're enough. It is fragile. It breaks with criticism. It retreats at the first sign of imperfection. It builds towers that look beautiful from a distance, but are hollow on the inside. Impressing people can get you attention. Yes, but attention is fleeting. What people admire today, they'll forget tomorrow. It shifts like the wind. But impact, that's different. Impact reaches into the marrow of people's lives. It speaks beyond the applause, beyond the surface. It doesn't require perfection, only presence. You don't need to have the most eloquent words or the most polished path. You need heart. You need honesty. You need the courage to show up where it matters and speak to what's real. Impact happens when someone feels less alone because you dared to be vulnerable. It happens when you give without expectation, when you lift someone not for credit but because it's right. Impressing others is often about self. It's driven by the question, how do I look? How do I sound? Will they like me? But impact is born from a better question. How can I serve? Who can I reach? What can I give that will matter long after I'm gone? That shift from self to service is where lives change. And when you begin to live that way, everything transforms. The pressure drops, the joy increases. You start to feel something deeper than success. You feel significance. There are people right now waiting for someone to stop performing and start being real. There are young eyes watching you, not for your perfection, but for your courage. There are friends and strangers who need the light you carry. Not a light filtered through flawless presentation, but a light that burns from experience, humility, and purpose. That is what heals, that is what lingers, that is what the world is desperate for. We were never meant to chase trends, applause, or social approval. Those things fade, they always do. But the heart that chooses to live with meaning, quietly, consistently, sometimes unseen, leaves marks that cannot be erased. It's not always glamorous. Impact doesn't always look impressive. Sometimes it's the softest words in the hardest moments. Sometimes it's the strength to forgive when bitterness feels justified. Sometimes it's just being there, showing up, not quitting when it would be easier to walk away. In a world obsessed with going viral, going deep is a revolution. Choosing to live a life of substance, to care more about who you're becoming than how you're being perceived, that is where your power lies. You were never meant to be a highlight reel. You were meant to be a lifeline. You were not sent here to perform for the crowd, but to reach the one, to carry something real, to live a life that echoes far beyond applause. Flaws don't disqualify, they illuminate. We've been taught to hide what's broken, to bury what's bruised, to cover every crack in our story with polish and silence. But the truth is, it's those very flaws that carry the greatest light. Not because they are glamorous, not because they are comfortable, but because they are ours real. Because they tell the truth. And truth is the one thing this world still stops and listens to when everything else fades into noise. There is a kind of beauty that only comes through brokenness. The kind that isn't manufactured. The kind that doesn't come with filters or applause. It is the quiet strength in someone who has fallen and yet risen. It is the resilience in the eyes of those who have faced the storm and lived to tell about it. We spend so much energy trying to appear whole, when wholeness isn't about having no wounds. It's about letting those wounds breathe in the open air so others can heal through them. You see, flaws are not evidence that you've failed. They are evidence that you've lived, that you've tried, that you've shown up and taken the risk to be fully human in a world that tries to reward only the polished. Flaws are the fingerprints of growth, the markers of progress, the signs that you are still becoming. And becoming is far more powerful than pretending. There is something sacred about the story that hasn't been edited, the journey that hasn't been smoothed out for presentation. When someone shares their truth without dressing it up, something shifts in the room. Hearts open, walls fall. People lean in because they recognize themselves. They see their own reflection in the imperfection. And in that moment, connection is born. That's where light comes in. That's where love lives. That's where transformation begins. We think that our flaws will make people pull away, but often, they are the very things that draw others closer. Vulnerability disarms the guarded. Honesty breaks chains. The very thing you thought would make you less worthy is often what makes you most trustworthy. Because if you've been through it, if you've felt the ache, if you've known the silence, the rejection, the fear, the failure, then your presence becomes a safe place for others who are still in it. Perfection is intimidating, it creates distance. But authenticity is magnetic, it creates belonging. And the people who impact the world the most are not the ones with spotless stories, but the ones who are not afraid to show where they've been cracked and where the light came through anyway. It is not about glorifying the pain, but about allowing it to speak, clearly, freely, with purpose. Your flaws do not make you less, they make you known. They allow your life to be a living testimony not of how perfect you are, but of how faithful you've been, how far you've come, how deeply you've grown. It's easy to admire perfection from a distance. But it's your flaws, the tender, unpolished parts, that invite others in and say, you belong here too. This is where strength is forged. In the struggle, in the questions, in the nights when you didn't know how you'd keep going. The fact that you're still standing, still reaching, still dreaming despite all you've been through, that is what speaks. That is what lights the way for others to believe they can keep going too. It is not your image that changes lives. It is your honesty. It is your light shining through the broken places, refusing to be dimmed. Flaws don't disqualify, they illuminate. We've been taught to hide what's broken, to bury what's bruised, to cover every crack in our story with polish and silence. But the truth is, it's those very flaws that carry the greatest light. Not because they are glamorous, not because they are comfortable, but because they are real. Because they tell the truth. And truth is the one thing this world still stops and listens to when everything else fades into noise. There is a kind of beauty that only comes through brokenness. The kind that isn't manufactured. The kind that doesn't come with filters or applause. It is the quiet strength in someone who has fallen and yet risen. It is the resilience in the eyes of those who have faced the storm and lived to tell about it. We spend so much energy trying to appear whole, when wholeness isn't about having no wounds. It's about letting those wounds breathe in the open air so others can heal through them. You see, flaws are not evidence that you've failed. They are evidence that you've lived, that you've tried, that you've shown up and taken the risk to be fully human in a world that tries to reward only the polished. Flaws are the fingerprints of growth, the markers of progress, the signs that you are still becoming. And becoming is far more powerful than pretending. There is something sacred about the story that hasn't been edited, the journey that hasn't been smoothed out for presentation. When someone shares their truth without dressing it up, something shifts in the room, hearts open, walls fall, people lean in, because they recognize themselves. They see their own reflection in the imperfection, and in that moment, connection is born. That's where light comes in. That's where love lives. That's where transformation begins. We think that our flaws will make people pull away, but often, they are the very things that draw others closer. Vulnerability disarms the guarded. Honesty breaks chains. The very thing you thought would make you less worthy is often what makes you most trustworthy. Because if you've been through it, if you've felt the ache, if you've known the silence, the rejection, the fear, the failure, then your presence becomes a safe place for others who are still in it. Perfection is intimidating. It creates distance, but authenticity is magnetic. It creates belonging. And the people who impact the world the most are not the ones with spotless stories, but the ones who are not afraid to show where they've been cracked and where the light came through anyway. It is not about glorifying the pain, but about allowing it to speak. Clearly, freely, with purpose. Your flaws do not make you less, they make you known. They allow your life to be a living testimony, not of how perfect you are, but of how faithful you've been, how far you've come, how deeply you've grown. It's easy to admire perfection from a distance, but it's your flaws, the tender, unpolished parts, that invite others in and say, you belong here too. This is where strength is forged. In the struggle, in the questions, in the nights when you didn't know how you'd keep going. The fact that you're still standing, still reaching, still dreaming despite all you've been through, that is what speaks. That is what lights the way for others to believe they can keep going too. It is not your image that changes lives. It is your honesty. It is your light shining through the broken places, refusing to be dimmed. Perfection chases image, purpose builds legacy. There is a vast difference between the two, though they often get confused. Image is what others see, what we craft, what we curate. It's the presentation we work hard to control, the highlight reel we show to the world. It's polished, it's rehearsed, and it's fragile. Purpose, on the other hand, runs deeper. It is not concerned with applause. It is not swayed by trends. It is rooted in something eternal, something that outlives us, something that touches lives long after the spotlight fades. When you live for image, you begin to measure your value by how you appear rather than who you are. You start comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's perfect snapshots. You chase approval, trying to stay relevant, trying to stay admired, but image is fleeting. It can be shattered with a rumor, erased by a mistake, replaced in a heartbeat. It requires constant maintenance, constant performance. It feeds the fear that if you are ever truly seen, without the filters, without the script, you will somehow lose your place. Purpose doesn't operate like that. It's not concerned with whether you're the most impressive person in the room. It asks a different question. Are you living with intention? Are you using what you've been given to serve, to love, to lift others? Purpose can't be faked. It is quiet, but it speaks loud. It is humble, but it is powerful. And it doesn't need a stage to have influence. There's nothing wrong with having a good image. But when image becomes the goal, purpose is often the cost. So many are exhausted trying to keep up appearances, never realizing that the world doesn't need more polished personas. It needs real people willing to build something that lasts. A legacy is not built through image. It's built through character, consistency, and courage. It's built in the moments no one sees. The way you treat people, the choices you make when no one is watching, the way you stand when it would be easier to sit down. We live in a time where image is celebrated, where platforms can be built overnight, where likes and followers are mistaken for impact. But what matters most isn't how many people know your name. It's how many lives were better because you lived. Legacy isn't about being remembered for your perfection. It's about being remembered for your love, your truth, your integrity. It's the difference you made, not the impression you left. Image fades, beauty fades, trends pass, but legacy remains. Purpose carves something permanent into the world. It leaves fingerprints on hearts, it shapes future generations. It stands when the applause is gone. It speaks long after your voice is quiet. And often, it's built through choices that are unseen, uncelebrated, even misunderstood in the moment. People chase image because it gives them temporary worth, but purpose gives eternal weight. Purpose says your life is not about how good you look doing it. It's about what you're actually doing. It asks you to show up, not for the camera, but for the cause. It invites you to care more about impact than impressions. It leads you to plant seeds in places you may never see bloom, simply because it is right. There is a freedom in choosing purpose over image. You no longer need to keep up the act. You no longer need to fear being exposed. You begin to live with a quiet strength, a steady fire. You understand that the goal is not perfection, but legacy. Not to be seen as flawless, but to be remembered as faithful. Not to be admired, but to be useful, true, and full of purpose. Your calling matters more than your credentials. In a world that often measures worth by degrees, titles, and accolades, this truth comes as both a challenge and a comfort. Credentials have their place. They reflect effort, discipline, and knowledge, but they are not the measure of destiny. They are not the blueprint of calling. Because calling comes from within, not from institutions. It is not handed to you on paper. It is birthed in the quiet places, often when no one else is looking. There is a reason some of the most impactful people in history didn't follow the conventional path. They didn't wait for permission to begin. They didn't let lack of qualifications become the reason they stayed silent. They listened to something deeper, a stirring, a voice, a weight in the soul that said, "This is what you were born for." And they moved, not because they were ready, but because they were willing. Calling is personal. It doesn't always make sense to others. It won't always look impressive on a resume. It may not get applause in the early stages, but it has a force behind it that credentials alone can't match. Because when you are truly called to something, you carry a sense of urgency and purpose that no classroom can create. You walk in rooms that your resume didn't open. You speak with authority that isn't borrowed from a title. It is earned in the trenches of life, in the battles that shaped you. Some of the most gifted voices go unheard because they doubt their right to speak. They sit quietly, believing the lie that without the right degree, the right platform, the right endorsement, they are not qualified. But calling doesn't come with a certificate. It comes with a responsibility. It is not about being the best on paper. It is about being faithful to the fire inside you. That fire doesn't need validation. It needs obedience. The world will try to convince you that credentials are the gatekeepers of opportunity. But there are doors that only calling can open. There are moments that credentials can't prepare you for, but your calling will carry you through them. There are people who don't need your title. They need your presence, your truth, your voice, your courage. And those things can't be earned in a classroom. They are forged in the moments when you choose to show up despite fear, to lead despite doubt, to give despite lack. Calling requires trust. Trust that what's inside of you is enough. Trust that you are not here by accident. Trust that the path will unfold as you walk it. And that doesn't mean you don't grow or learn or improve. But it means you stop waiting until everything looks right on the outside. Because if you wait until you feel fully qualified, you may never begin. And some of the most powerful movements in history began not with a credentialed expert, but with someone who simply said yes. There is a boldness that comes when you understand your life has meaning beyond a title. There is a confidence that rises when you know you are called, even if no one else sees it yet. And there is a peace that comes when you stop trying to prove your worth and instead start living it. Credentials may open doors of recognition, but calling opens doors of purpose. Credentials might impress, but calling transforms. One tells the world what you've achieved. The other tells the world why you're here. The world needs your authenticity, not your polish. In an age where perfection is packaged and sold on every screen, authenticity has become a rare and powerful force. People are tired of being impressed. They are longing to be moved, to be seen, to know they are not alone in their struggle, their questions, their becoming. And nothing pierces through the noise like a voice that refuses to pretend. Polish may catch the eye, but authenticity captures the heart. It's not about having all the right words. It's about meaning the words you say. It's not about flawless presentation. It's about presence, raw, honest, and true. The kind of presence that says, "I've been there too." The kind that allows others to take a deep breath and finally lay down the weight of comparison. Because when you show up as yourself, You give permission for others to do the same. There's a difference between being excellent and being fake. Excellence grows from care and intention. But polish without authenticity becomes a mask. And masks are heavy. They disconnect us from others. They protect our image while isolating our hearts. You don't have to be everything to everyone. You don't have to be the most impressive person in the room. You just have to be real. That is what people are aching for, realness. Not performance. Not perfection. Just presence that is honest, human, and rooted in something deeper than applause. Authenticity speaks with the authority of lived experience. It doesn't need to embellish or exaggerate. It doesn't need to prove anything. It simply is. And in that simplicity there is a kind of beauty that can't be replicated. When someone speaks from their truth, when they bring their full, unedited self to the table, something shifts. The walls come down, the room changes, because truth has a frequency, and authenticity tunes people in. You don't have to be at the top of your game to be impactful. You don't need a perfect background, the perfect words, or the perfect moment. All you need is the willingness to show up, exactly as you are, and let your life speak. The cracks in your story are not weaknesses, they are windows. They let light in. They let others see the process, the progress, the path. And more than anything, people need to know that it's okay to be in process, that you don't have to have it all figured out to begin making a difference. Too many voices stay silent because they believe they're not polished enough to be heard. But it's not the polish that heals. It's the truth. It's the testimony of someone who has walked through the fire and kept walking. It's the gentleness of someone who has failed and learned and decided to keep loving anyway. Authenticity isn't about exposure. It's about invitation. It says, this is me, and if you're still figuring it out too, that's okay. The most memorable people are rarely the most polished. They are the most present. They are the ones who show up when it's inconvenient, who speak when it's uncomfortable, who love when it's costly. They are the ones who don't try to control the outcome. They just bring their whole heart into the moment. And that kind of presence changes things. This world doesn't need more experts who speak from a distance. It needs voices who are close enough to care, honest enough to connect, brave enough to be seen. Authenticity carries a weight that polish never can, because it's not about impressing people. It's about reaching them. It's about living in such a way that people don't just admire your story. They find themselves in it. Success without meaning is still empty. It is possible to climb every ladder, reach every milestone, collect all the praise, and still feel a quiet ache inside. That ache is not failure. It is the soul reminding you that you were made for more than accomplishment. You were made for alignment, and no amount of applause can ever satisfy a heart that was created for purpose. The world will celebrate your titles, your trophies, your talent. It will measure your value by your production, your influence, your speed. But meaning lives in a different realm. Meaning doesn't shout, it whispers. It meets you in the moments no one else sees, in the way you treat someone who can do nothing for you, in the courage it takes to keep showing up when it would be easier to quit, in the decision to do what is right, not what is easy. Success might fill your calendar, but meaning fills your soul. We've all been conditioned to chase outcomes, to move fast, to build bigger, to reach higher. But there comes a moment when you realize that winning the race isn't the same as knowing why you're running. You can gain the world and still lose your way. You can have the spotlight and still feel invisible to yourself, because success without purpose is a shell. It may look impressive on the outside, but it's hollow, and it cannot hold you when the applause fades. Meaning isn't always flashy. It doesn't always look like the biggest stage or the loudest voice. Sometimes it's quiet faithfulness in a small place. Sometimes it's choosing presence over performance. Sometimes it's staying when others walk away, listening when others talk over, forgiving when it doesn't make sense. These things don't always get recognition, but they leave a legacy. They build a life that stands when the surface things fall. There are people who look successful but are silently breaking under the pressure of keeping up an image. There are people who are envied by many but known by few. Because true meaning doesn't come from being admired. It comes from being authentic. From doing what you were created to do, not what others expect you to do. From aligning your life with your values, not just your goals. You can feel the difference when you're living from meaning. There's a peace in your spirit. There's clarity in your direction. There's strength in your decisions, even when they're hard. You stop chasing applause and start pursuing alignment. You stop asking, what will people think? And start asking, is this true to who I am? That shift changes everything, because success might bring opportunity, but meaning brings fulfillment. It grounds you. It roots you. It reminds you that your life is more than a resume. It's a message. Chasing meaning doesn't mean you won't achieve great things, but it does mean you won't be consumed by them. You'll know how to let go of what doesn't serve your soul. You'll know how to say no to what looks good but isn't right. You'll choose depth over display. You'll stop trying to be everything and start being exactly who you were designed to be. There is a kind of wealth that can't be measured in dollars, a kind of success that can't be seen on a stage. It's in the relationships you build, the peace you carry, the integrity you protect. It's in the quiet knowing that your life matters, not because of how high you climbed, but because of how deeply you lived. That is what makes a life meaningful. That is what gives success its substance. Without meaning, success is a costume. With meaning, it becomes a calling. Greatness is not found in the spotlight, it's born in the shadows. It is not the crowd that makes you great, nor the recognition, nor the titles they hand you when you've crossed a line they drew for you. Greatness is forged when no one is watching, in the decisions you make when no one else is clapping, in the moments of silence where you still choose to believe, still choose to move, still choose to stand. The spotlight may reveal what you do, but the shadows reveal who you are. We've been taught to chase visibility, as if being seen is the highest proof of value. But the deepest work is done in the unseen. The character that holds you up when the stage tries to shake you is not developed under applause. It is built in solitude. It is built in prayer, in reflection, in failure, in sacrifice. When you're building something meaningful, you will spend more time in preparation than in performance. And that is not punishment. That is protection. The world tells you to shine, but what good is shining if you have no foundation? What good is fame if your soul is starving? What good is being admired if you no longer know who you are beneath the admiration? The shadows give you time to find your roots. They humble you. They strip away what is false. They teach you how to endure without applause, how to trust without results, how to serve without recognition. And that is where greatness begins. Not when people start watching, but when you start becoming. Too many people try to rush into visibility, not realizing that a platform can crush you if your character isn't ready to carry it. The shadows slow you down. They remind you that what you build in secret determines how long it lasts in public. There is no shortcut through the shadows. There is no cheat code for depth. You either walk through the valley or you stay shallow, and shallow cannot hold greatness. The people who truly change the world are not always the ones you see on magazine covers or in viral videos. They are the ones who show up when it's inconvenient, who love when it costs them, who serve without needing to be celebrated. They carry a quiet fire, a strength that doesn't need to be announced. Because they know who they are, and they know why they're here. They have been shaped by the shadows, refined, not diminished. In the shadows, you learn how to lead yourself. You learn how to confront your ego, how to wrestle with your fears, how to persevere through the lonely seasons. You learn to walk with integrity when no one is checking. You learn to forgive in secret, to give in silence, to wait with dignity. These things don't make headlines, but they make history. Because greatness is not about being the loudest voice. It's about being the most faithful heart. And when the light does come, when the moment arrives where you are seen, it will not overwhelm you, because you have been prepared. You have been tested. You have been anchored. The light will not blind you, because you've walked long enough in the dark to recognize the difference between a spotlight and true illumination. You'll use the platform, but you won't be defined by it. You'll speak, but you won't perform. You'll lead, but you won't control. You will have grown deep enough to be trusted with influence. Greatness built in the shadows does not crumble. It stands, it withstands, it endures. Because it was never dependent on the validation of others. It was formed in silence. It was born of fire. It carries truth. And truth, once awakened, does not go back to sleep. It doesn't need to shout. It simply walks into the room and changes everything. Let us then be bold enough to live a different dream, not one stitched together by perfection, applause, or surface success, but one grounded in purpose, forged in authenticity, and shaped by quiet faithfulness. The new American dream is not about arriving, it is about becoming. It is not about performing. It is about being present. It is not about building a name. It is about building a life that means something. This is the call to trade image for impact, fear for faith, credentials for calling, polish for presence, and pressure for peace. To choose depth over display, truth over trends, and meaning over momentary praise. This is not weakness, it is power. Not the kind the world flaunts, but the kind that heaven trusts. Because when you live with purpose over perfection, you don't just chase a dream, you become one.